That was our homies right there. You know what I'm saying? We kicked it with them all the motherfucking time.
Wow.
That was the first dude I seen. You think Jada Pinkett was entangling? She was entangling with Chris Kelly from motherfucking Crisscross, because Crisscross was in the room and he was like, Jada Pinkett is at the door, but don't leave.
Everything that he did, and this is everything that Chris started to do. I can tell you who he smoked his first joint with. I can tell you who he had his first drink with. I can tell you who he's with when he had sex with somebody who put him up to that. You know, everything he did, he thought that he was getting away with something, and all of this, he was encouraged to do all these things with adults. And I was like, y'all are not helping me out here. This is a kid, you know. But once the barn doors open, I mean, it's open and you can't hold back. You can't put a child in an adult arena and then still tell them, oh, you're still a child. You know?
You kicked me to the curb.
I was done with you.
Yeah.
Marriages have that, though. Marriages have that.
Yeah, we broke up.
And then what did you do, Jada?
Well, you know, I think from there, you know, as time went on, I got into a different kind of entanglement.
The youngest successful rappers in history of music. How old are you, both of you?
Both 13. First thing for me is I can't please all my girls. All the girls.
What if everything you thought you knew about Chris Kelly's tragic passing was a lie? Chris Smith, the other half of the iconic duo, is now speaking out. And what he's saying is turning heads. He's pointing his fingers at Jada Pinkett Smith and Jermaine Dupri, holding them responsible for the dark downfall of the Crisscross star. With talks of alleged entanglements to a possible cover-up circling in the air, things are starting to look a whole lot messier than anyone expected. According to him, Jada is the reason Chris was struggling and had to turn to illegal substances, and Jermaine knew all about it. Just what did Smith say? Could Jada really have played a role in leading a teen down a dangerous path? And did Jermaine help sweep things under the rug? Let's find out. Back in 1992, two teens from Atlanta burst onto the scene with the help of producer and rapper Jermaine Dupri, who spotted them at a local mall.
We were out in the outside the store there, and we were just having this back and forth thing, and Chris Smith was saying, "Oh, Donna, let him get the sneak," you know. So, and that's when Jermaine and what's her name? I can't think of her name.
Deanna from Soul Times Love. She was the DJ of that group at the time.
And they came strolling by, and really the rest is history, because Chris, they were the cutest little boys. And that day we had happened to go to the barbershop. They had fresh haircuts and they just looked so clean. And all the little girls at the mall was messing with them.
That chance meeting led to the birth of Crisscross, a duo that made waves not just with their music, but with their signature style of wearing their clothes backward.
Why don't we start off by having you introduce yourselves to the audience?
Yo, what up, man?
Yeah. Now, how did the name come about?
You know, back in school, he used to, my boys used to use this term because they got a lot of girls and stuff. Yeah. Just got it from around the face. All the girls used to call us Max.
Yeah. I bet you have a lot of girls now.
Yeah.
A lot of people, all ages, all colors, they watch the show. Some don't realize right now that your pants are on backwards, see? So would you just stand up just for a minute and show me exactly how this thing works? And for the most part, you wear most of your clothes back.
Yeah.
Well, now this coat.
The most shocking part, the best friends were only 12 and 13 years old, and yet somehow they had Jermaine wrapped around their finger. During a 2018 interview with Grammy.com, the producer said, "You gotta understand, people out there, Crisscross weren't rappers. They weren't kids walking around with demos. They weren't trying to be rappers. They weren't trying to be singers. When I met them, I said, 'What do y'all do?' He said, 'We just cool.' I was like, damn, get these guys a record fast." And Jermaine was right to give the boys a chance. Their debut single, Jump, dominated charts in 1992 and became the crown jewel of their multi-platinum album, Totally Crossed Out. With Jermaine Dupri penning the lyrics, the young duo showcased unexpected maturity in their delivery. The song stayed at #1 in the US for 8 weeks, selling 4 million copies. The track wasn't just a hit, it was a full-blown phenomenon, and just like that, Kris Kross was running in the big leagues. The duo then went on to share the stage with Michael Jackson on tour. They also made guest appearances on various TV shows and even scored their own video game. Pretty wild for a couple of teenagers.
The Make My Video Show, starring the top of hip-hop, the Pac-Man who ain't no white man, boy Packer.
Unfortunately, the group never managed to release a hit like Jump Again, but they did win hearts with tracks like Warm It Up and Tonight's the Night. In fact, they released 2 more albums in the 1990s before Kelly and Smith went their separate ways. Of course, along the way, some folks did have concerns about 2 kids being pushed in the spotlight at a young age. Specifically, back in 2009, fans grew concerned when photos of Chris Kelly surfaced showing bald patches. Rumors swirled about his health. Fans were talking about cancer, but Kelly cleared the air in a candid interview, explaining that he had alopecia, a condition that causes hair loss. "My health is good, I just got alopecia, I don't have cancer, not other sort of diseases." However, fans were in for a bigger shock as they read about the passing of Chris Kelly only years later. The rapper was found unresponsive at his Atlanta residence on May 1st, 2013, and was taken to a nearby hospital where he was pronounced dead.
Dwayne 648 today, an autopsy is scheduled for the member of the famed hip-hop duo Kris Kross, Chris Kelly, pronounced dead Wednesday evening at an Atlanta hospital. There is still no word on a cause of death. The 34-year-old was found unresponsive at his home. Kelly, together with Chris Smith, shot to stardom in 1992 with the song Jump. The track spent 8 weeks on the Billboard Hot 100. The member of Kris Kross were known for wearing their clothes backwards during performances. They also toured with Michael Jackson, even had their own video game. Kelly and Smith were 13 years old when they were discovered in 1991 at an Atlanta mall by producer Jermaine Dupri.
As for what took his life, Chris's mom told authorities in Atlanta that her son became sick after taking illegal substances on the night before he passed away. According to her, Chris had a history of substance use issues, and as expected, everyone was distraught. His better half, Chris Smith, released a statement saying, "Chris Kelly was my best friend. He was like a brother. I love him and will miss him dearly. Our friendship began as little boys in first grade. We grew up together. It was a blessing to achieve the success, travel the world, and entertain Kris Kross fans all around the world with my best friend," he continued. "It is what we wanted to do and what brought us happiness. I will always cherish the memories of the C Connection." Jermaine also released a statement mourning the loss. He said, "To the world, Chris was Mac Daddy, but to me, he was a son I never had. When I think about it, I spent more time with Chris and Chris than damn near anybody in my whole life, so you can imagine how bad this hurts. I will always love you, Chris, and I will never let the world forget you. May God bless your soul."
You want me to go get you some tissue? Okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. How are your feelings as the event gets closer?
I'm very excited. Because Chris died the way he did, and there were a lot of speculation and innuendo, some of that I would like to get cleared up. But I'm just very excited that we can put this together in remembrance of him. And I'm also excited that we as a people, and I mean as a black people, we don't do enough to help our youth. And I was speaking to someone who was the president of a school, and he said, these kids, they want to go to school, and he said, every little drop in the bucket helps. So he was like, he said, you know, he was so encouraged, and he made me feel so good.
Chris's label, So Def, also released a statement saying, "To millions of fans worldwide, he was the trend-setting, backward pants-wearing one half of Kris Kross who loved making music. But to us, he was just Chris, the kind, generous, and fun-loving life of the party. Though he was only with us a short time, we feel blessed to have been able to share some incredible moments with him. His legacy will live on through his music." But even with all the answers on the table, fans had a hard time accepting the loss. Just how could someone so young be gone so soon? Well, it looks like Jada Pinkett Smith and Jermaine Dupri share the blame for the tragedy. How's that? Well, back in 2022, Daz Dillinger turned a lot of heads when he said that Jada had an entanglement with Chris Kelly back in 1993.
Dude, I seen, you think Jada Pinkett was entangling? She was entangling with Chris Kelly from motherfucking Kris Kross, because Kris Kross was in the room and he was like, Jada Pinkett is at the door, but don't leave. Take this weed. Chill. We like, damn, that motherfucker gave us an ounce of weed. We gonna kick it right here. Then he came back in, he said, yeah, that was Jada Pinkett. I'm like, damn, this is fucking Jada Pinkett at a young age.
Wow, Chris Kelly was that?
1993, around that way.
Wow.
You know, yes, she was entangling me. Shout out to Jada.
Mind you, Chris would have been 15 while Jada was 22 back then. But that age gap didn't stop Jada from corrupting Chris. She apparently gave him illegal substances. Now, some folks thought that Daz was only name-dropping Jada for the spotlight, but it doesn't seem that way. See, Jada's not the straight shooter everyone thinks she is. She has a dark past. In fact, back when she was a tea-anger, she was out selling illegal substances.
Since I played that clip, can we talk about that moment that you had to sell crack?
Oh, yeah.
Because when you brought that up, I was like, what? And then you left us on that cliffhanger. What were the circumstances? Like, what were you at in your life?
So, I was about 14, 15 years old. My mom was really deep in her addiction. Really deep in her addiction. And it was just her and I. You know, the two stable people that I had in my life, which was my grandmother, passed away when I was 13, right? So she was like a safe haven for me. And then my bonus father, my stepdad, who she was married to at the time, they decided to get a divorce, right? I didn't know whether my mom was gonna make it or not. You know what I mean? And so I really felt like I really gotta go out here and figure out how to gain some security, some safety, right?
Yeah, that's right. Jada revealed it herself during an interview with People. Apparently, she came from a troubled home, and back then, her only hope of getting out of that mess was to dabble in illegal substances. The actress said, "I knew that anything that I needed was something I needed to provide for. I decided to sell drugs." Growing up, the drug dealers were the ones that had affluence. That's what we readily saw as success. And so for me, considering my circumstances at the time, my mother was not doing well. She was a high-functioning heroin addict. We didn't have the things that we should have. The home we lived in was not taken care of. And get this, Jada kept living this lifestyle right up until she crossed paths with Tupac Shakur.
One of the things that's very interesting that I've never really said before is that when I first met Pac, when we first met, I was a drug dealer. And yes. And that was, and so to just give you, I won't get into the details of it because I'm going to write a book about it, but just to give you like, that's how we started. Then as I was coming out, something very bad happened to me. As I was coming out of the life, he was going more into the life. And so, and I've been having kind of an existential crisis around Pac because I was coming out, he was going in. And, you know, there was a point in which we met. And then we kind of were going our separate ways.
For reference, these two met in 1986 when they were sophomores at the Baltimore School of Arts. Now, this is around the time Jada was getting her life on track, but remember, she met Chris in 1993. It's hard to believe that she managed to kick her old habits in such a short amount of time. In fact, based on what Daz revealed and Jada's shady history, a lot of fans believe that Jada might have led Chris down a wrong path. And if you think that's a stretch, well, take a seat because Chris's own mom blamed the industry for claiming the life of her young boy.
Because Chris died the way he did, and there were a lot of speculation and innuendo, some of that I would like to get cleared up, but I'm just very excited that we can put this together in remembrance of him. And I'm also excited that we as a people, and I mean as a black people, we don't do enough to help our youth. And I was speaking to someone who was the president of a school, and he said, these kids, they want to go to school, and he said every little drop in the bucket helps. So he was like, he said, you know, I'm just so, he was so encouraged and he made me feel so good.
According to her, Chris had been struggling in the industry for a long time, and he could only cope with mounting pressures by turning to illegal substances.
The most important piece of advice that you could give another parent or family that may be dealing with a loved one that's suffering from substance abuse?
You know what, as far as Chris with substance abuse, I want to say this. I know he died of a heroin overdose. Chris's drug of choice was really alcohol. He had a drinking problem, and he knew it. And he just, some days, he would, sometimes he would just be doing his thing. That's what I would call it. And then some days he was sober as a judge. He could go weeks and weeks and weeks without touching anything. It's when it's your family member, it's personal, and you want to talk to them, and sometimes they don't want to talk to you. You just have to always be there for them.
However, he started dabbling in the more dangerous stuff in the last months of his life, and that's only because he had reached his breaking point.
Yes, he smoked weed, like most. This heroin thing was something that came along in his life in the last 6 months. And he started it, and I think it took hold of him, and he couldn't shake it loose. He was aware of it, and I think he was going to get help. There's a long story I can tell. We don't have time for it. But
as for what pushed Chris to his breaking point, his mom had a clear answer to that. She believed that it was the fact Chris was pushed into an adult industry at a young age. That kind of exposure left him vulnerable to all kinds of predators, especially people like Jada.
We had some conversations that we hadn't had his whole life. But because Chris was in the industry and he started at 13 years old, it took him a long time to mature.
Do you think that has something to do with his substance abuse, the industry?
Because he started everything that he did, and this was everything that Chris started to do. I can tell you who he smoked his first joint with. I can tell you who he had his first drink with. I can tell you who he's with when he had sex with somebody, who put him up to that. Everything he did, he thought that he was getting away with something, and all of this, he was encouraged to do all of these things with adults. And I was like, y'all are not helping me out here.
Mm-hmm.
This is a kid, But once the barn door is open, it's open and you can't hold back. You can't put a child in an adult arena and then still tell them, oh, you're still a child,
Now, Chris's mom didn't take any names, but fans had a strong feeling she was targeting people like Jermaine and Jada with her words. For starters, Jermaine was responsible for looking over the boys, but he failed them big time. Meanwhile, Jada, well, she was pushing Chris to the dark side with her entanglements and a legal business. And for anyone who still has doubts about Jada's role in all of this, well, you might not know about Jada's obsession with young boys. Yeah, that's right. Back in 2020, Jada admitted to having an entanglement with August Alsina during an episode of Red Table Talk.
It's a situation that I considered private.
You just feel like it ain't really nobody's business.
Yeah.
But now Black Twitter has claimed it as their business.
And I were going through a very difficult time.
Yeah.
And we decided...
I was done with your ass.
Yeah, you kicked me to the curb.
I was done with you.
Yeah.
Marriages have that, though. Marriages have that.
Yeah, we broke up.
And then what did you do, Jada?
Well, I think from there, as time went on, I got into a different kind of entanglement with August.
Entanglement?
Yes. Yes.
A relationship.
Yes, it was a relationship, absolutely.
During an interview with Vulture, August confirmed the rumors as well, saying, "I don't know why that word is such an issue. I would agree with Jada. If you look up the definition of entanglement, it is a complex and difficult relationship. It was exactly that. I think it's just the language that probably stuck out to people, but I definitely have to agree with it being an entanglement. It definitely was something complicated, a complicated dynamic." The crazy part is that the pair got involved when August was 23 and Jada was 44 back in 2015. Now, that's not enough to sound off the alarm for the authorities, but the fact that Jada went for someone so young had fans side-eyeing her from all. It raises some serious questions about the nature of her friendship with Chris Kelly. One person wrote, "I don't know how true any of that is, especially since he's not here to defend himself. However, I don't think I would be too shocked if Jada really was messing with him when he was bleep, especially since she had no problem sleeping with someone who was young enough to be her son." At the end of the day, Chris Kelly's loss came as a huge shock to friends, family, and fans everywhere. And even years later, people can't help but question who was responsible. That said, given how the industry's darkest secrets have been getting exposed lately, it's only appropriate that the authorities look into Chris's passing as well, and maybe even launch an investigation into Jada and Jermaine. But what do you think? Is Jada really responsible for Chris's passing? And did Jermaine help cover it up? Let us know what you think in the comment section below, and make sure to check out this next video.